What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. As always, this video is brought to you by NutriBio Supplements, Crystals Bikinis for all your trunk and suit needs, and Bio Longevity Labs, the best peptide research company in the US. All the links and codes for those companies will be in the description. And so, as one chapter ends, a new chapter begins. And this chapter is going to be referred to as Project Super Heavy. That's the goal. So, for everyone that followed the prep series, the final video is coming. But that one's going to be a little bit longer, and I'm still waiting for more of like the official like Gilco Productions high quality content to put the whole video together. My fiance Kelsey actually is going to put it all together for me. We did some different filming. She did some recording throughout, and she's going to kind of put it together for me as a gift. And then I'm going to put it up as the final episode of the prep series. So for anyone that watched that or is wondering in terms of like how the show went or how I looked, that's where you'll find that. I wanted to get this out though because I'm itching to get started. I'm excited for the rebound process and to use this as an opportunity, another opportunity to really level up, because it was obvious at the show that heavyweight class, even being maxed out, both in terms of body weight and conditioning, is not what's best for my physique long term. I need to be a super heavy. And so this is the start of my journey into that weight category and that level of size. So I'm going to walk through all of this. Today is the Monday after the show. Um, so Saturday after the show, went to IHOP, took down took down the whole menu. I say that, and I ended up throwing out half of what I ordered. Um, this year, I think probably with maturity, as you get older every year, it seems like that lust for food and also following through and like eating until you're uncomfortable. The desire for all that kind of fades. And then your eyes end up being a lot bigger than your stomach. So you end up like ordering more stuff than what you actually end up eating. So Saturday night after the show, did IHOP, um, did a small Domino's pizza as well. Didn't even finish that. That made me feel pretty terrible. Um, Sunday, didn't wake up with much of an appetite. Did about an hour walk. Um, Packed up the Airbnb, had like pretty much like an early morning fast. Then Kelsey and I went to breakfast. We had the drive home from Jacksonville, so that was probably 4 hours. We did lunch. We did like sandwiches and appetizers for lunch, and then we did like a Japanese sushi steakhouse place for dinner. So, um, you know, food choice wise, definitely like pigged out Saturday night. Three big meals Sunday, and then today is Monday. So what I'm doing today actually, um, which is a little bit of a newer approach for me. Normally Monday I would just be right back to the gym and starting like the rebound diet or plan. And I just didn't, my body just didn't feel up to it. I used a lot of Winstrol and Letrozole the final week, to really bring like that dryness. And so, I just figured it would be best to like kind of rehydrate and also use this as an opportunity to kind of reset in terms of insulin sensitivity, instead of piling more food on top of like a weekend of food that I never eat. So today I'm basically gonna fast as long as I can hold out, like, until I feel like I'm starving. So that might be all day. It might be until like a meal before bed. Regardless, the only meals I'm going to be doing today, if at all, will just be protein and veggies. So no fats, no carbs. Did fasted cardio this morning. Gonna hit all my steps. I'm gonna sauna at one point also. Um, and that will really set me up tomorrow to hit the ground running. So in terms of the plan, I'm gonna walk you guys through all of it: training, diet, um, PEDs, and then also peptides. So hopefully this is what you guys are seeing here. This spreadsheet with training. Okay, so this is just based on how I looked and what I see from the photos and the videos, and being objective with myself, being as critical as I can, and also being as realistic as I can. I put together a plan in my head, and then I spoke with my coach, Justin Compton, and I also spoke with my good friend and co-host of the One More Rep podcast, Austin Brown, to kind of get a second opinion on training, to see if there was anything that I was missing or had a bias towards. And I have decided, even after, so the past year, I had 2 leg days as a standard, and that really helped bring my legs up from all angles, especially like my glutes and my hamstrings. I think came up quite a bit. But if and I love to train legs. I love the idea of having a big dominant set of legs. But if I'm being objective with myself and then getting, some trusted opinions, it doesn't make a ton of sense for how I look to train legs twice a week, to allocate that much of my recovery budget towards it. And then also just time. Like if I'm only going to train 5 days a week, it doesn't make sense for 2 of them to be entirely legs. So the big body parts or priorities, um, much of the same from the past couple of years, or pretty much my entire bodybuilding journey: chest, arms, shoulders. And I think in that order: chest, arms, shoulders. Delts have come up the most out of all of those. And I think I have the best formula and understanding of what my delts need to grow out of those three. So not a lot needs to change there. But the chest and the arms still need to come up quite a bit. So this split kind of reflects that. Um, on the point about the legs, I think the only area that I feel could use like additional attention would be the adductors, just because they just add so much to the leg. And I already have good sweep and good quads. And so filling in that middle part really will display like a dominant set of legs, both front and rear. So kicking it off: back, buys, and legs. I put legs, it's pretty much just hamstrings and glutes, but so I'll hit a big dominant like upper back row. I'm looking at heavier weights here. Um, and then lat movements, bicep movements, adductors, good mornings. I like good mornings. I think about it. It is a hinge where the hamstrings are stretched, but this is like one of the best glute movements, I think. And then we have the prime line leg curl. chest delts, tries, pretty straightforward stuff. And then I'll rest. I'll have my one like full on leg day. It's pretty much quads and glutes because, hamstrings are earlier in the week. And for me, like seeing the difference in how my conditioning looked from having bigger glutes, that is still always going to be a priority to me or something that I want to continue to grow or improve. So that's why there's as much direct glute work as there is. Um, and then so I have this. This is kind of a new style of a day for me, where it's chest and arms. So I'll start with a reverse band incline Smith. That's something that I like a whole lot, especially as someone that has a pec tear or previously had a pec tear. That reverse band really makes me feel safe, but also allows me to get in really hard sets on a big compound movement. So I'll hit that, and then it's basically just a full arm workout. And then I will finish with like an AMRAP on Smith push-ups. I say that because I'll set the Smith machine at the lowest setting, um, and then I'll grab the bar and do push-ups on that. Um, and then I finish the week, training week at least, with back and delts together, which again is kind of I would normally always do things like paired like this, where it's like back buys and then chest delts tries, basically a pull and push day. And then later in the week, it's kind of allocated differently, where it's chest and arms and then back and delts to their own day. I'm looking forward to that. I love training both of those body parts, and you feel like especially good pumps in both of those body parts. It just adds a lot to your width and how wide you look. And then that will also be a day that I have just some adductor work there at the beginning, to just really emphasize being able to add the thickness to the middle of the leg. So training wise, that's what I'm going to be doing. Diet wise, here is where I'm at with things. This is going to start tomorrow. And really the only changes, because you'll see it's just the one diet. There are just notes on what to pull out, like rest day or training day. So there's 7 training day meals. That's, the seventh is basically, I don't mean seventh like in order, but this post workout meal gets removed on rest days. So rest days will just have the standard 6. And then also, of course, I won't have an intra workout shake on my rest days. But in terms of the training days, it's basically 4 whole food based meals or protein sourced meals. And then I'm utilizing the NutriBio sponsorship. They take great care of me, and they make the best products that digest the best and taste the best for me. So I'll do 3 whey meals, and I did this all prep, and I really have found that this is like a balance, especially if I'm, doing the 7 meals. I have found anywhere between like 7 to 900 grams of cooked protein or meat total for the day is about what my stomach can handle. So there'll be 4 of those meals. There's 2 chicken and rice meals, an egg whites and rice meal, and then a beef and rice meal. So 4, whole food meals, and then 3 of them are going to be based with whey protein. And then here you have your totals. So 380 protein. And this is total, guys. This is not like the Justin Harris style where it's like just direct sources. This is total with everything. 380 protein, 423 carb, 58 grams of fat, and just under 4,000 calories a day on training days. So probably, let's say 3,300 or something like that on rest days. And this will be basically the start. I should even notate that this is starting tomorrow, and then I'll update the different iterations. So anytime there's a diet update, I'll include it in these videos. I'm going to be doing these Rebound and into the off-season videos. I'm really just going to do one video a week like this, just outlining it for the whole year. Um, and then cardio wise, so he makes it a big point. Like, I was ready early, so I was, he told me to stop doing the stairs basically at 5 weeks out, and I think he's just a big proponent, especially when you're growing, of like less is more with actual cardio, or even like the, for lack of a better term, like fatigue or stress that the cardio causes, because it will just take away from the training. So 5 times a week, he's got me doing a 25-minute walk outside. Um, and once my joints start feeling a little bit more healthy, and like some of these like harsher compounds start to work their way out, I'll start wearing a weighted vest to make it more like a proper session of cardio. I did that most of the prep. Once I got to a point where I was ready, I stopped wearing it, but I'll put that back in. I think that's an easy way to make the cardio of a higher caloric burn. And then separate from that walk, I have 6,500 steps that I'm going to do every day. So just a good baseline level of activity to keep me moving. Um, Especially most of these steps are like post meal walks to help manage the blood sugar, which, as you guys will see, I'm going to run high growth hormone. So that is always um, a consideration, is managing the blood glucose, especially as food goes up. So here's the fun stuff that everyone always wants to know about. So I'll start with the peptides. I'm starting retatrutide. I started that this morning. So this is going to be 1.5 milligrams, and that's over the course of the week. The way that I am going to break this up, and I've done this both ways now, because I started the retatrutide early in my prep and ran it up until 3 weeks out. I could do like a micro dose, like 200 micrograms a day, which is basically the same amount. Um, but I'm going to give a little bit less frequency to the injections. I'm going to do 500 micrograms Monday, Wednesday, Friday. So that gets me to a milligram and a half per week. SLU, I'm going to do 1,000 micrograms a day, and I'm taking that entirely fasted. That cardio that I talked about, like that morning walk, is always fasted. And then even the 2 days a week that I don't have like the weighted vest walk, I still am doing at least a 20-minute walk towards my step count fasted. I'm very, very convinced, as an enhanced bodybuilder, especially with all of these different peptides and different fat loss aids, let's call them. Fasted cardio is great, and I think it's just great for your gut and your digestion as well. It prepares the body to accept food. So the SLU, I know some people are like taking it multiple times a day. That's cool. I think besides before morning cardio, I think pre-workout makes sense too. But for me, I'm just taking it all first thing in the morning. Mot C, I will be doing 1 milligram every day. Same thing. These are all like fasted in the morning, guys, before cardio. AOD, I found a huge, huge benefit in this, and I may make a separate video on this to show the visuals. But my right glute and right love handle had always, even when I was like pretty much stripped fat free and like the left side was totally dug out, that right side would still have just like a little bit of a layer of fat. So I site injected this into that right like glute and love handle area, and it actually ended up being leaner than the left side, and it happened quickly once I started using this. So I'm going to continue with that. Obviously, the goal right now is not fat loss, but I'm going to continue all these, because if I can bias my body towards being in a better spot to partition nutrients and bias my body towards not storing fat and utilizing fat. Um, I think that will only help as I'm growing and pushing my body weight up. I think it will just bias my body towards being more anabolic. 5 amino 1 MQ. So this, full transparency, I probably wouldn't, if you're watching this now, I would probably only ever recommend using this in like inside, like from 6 weeks out from a contest on. The fact that I'm going to use this post show is because I have an entire bottle that I didn't open, that I didn't get through. Um, so I have a bottle, and for 100 milligrams a day, I have enough to run it for 30 days. So I'm gonna use it again. I think this will improve or help to improve or contribute to my metabolic capacity, um, and preventing fat gain. But this isn't even like the top end dose. I went up to 150 milligrams a day, even at one point 200 milligrams a day, during the end of the prep. And I put these two in at the same time and saw very quick changes. I put them in at 6 weeks out, and then about 10 days later, um, Justin, my coach, I had a check in one day where he was just like, "Wow, we're ready." Again, there's a lot of other things going on, but these two definitely supercharge the process. I'll keep the cardarine in 20 milligrams a day. Yohimbine, I worked this up during the prep up to like 15 or 20 milligrams. Um, and then I started to feel a little edgy from it. So, I think 5 milligrams is enough to get a benefit, but not enough to really have any negatives. GOP, this is Grains of Paradise. This is a very interesting product. This is backed by research. It shows, um, I believe, a big effect on the reduction of brown fat tissue. And that's a product made by NutraBio or Unbound Supplements. Injectable L-carnitine. This prep was my first experience with this. I used to kind of roll my eyes at it. But being that they make these concentrations now that are 500 or 600 milligrams per ml, and it's just basically 1 ml a day. I mean, my gear is pretty much 1 ml a day. So I just shoot them bilaterally. Like I'll put my gear in one shoulder, my L-carnitine in the other shoulder. Um, I think that from what I've read and seen with it, I think this is probably something that I will continue to use in every part of the competitive bodybuilding lifestyle, off season, cruise, prep, rebound, all of it. And then oral BPC, I have always preferred the oral version because for me, I don't, knock on wood, I've never really like needed to use BPC to help recover from an injury. And so the big one for me has always been my gut. And when I push food, it gets a little skittish. So I have found a massive benefit. Some people talk about doing 500 micrograms, and that's when, that's all you need to see a benefit for your gut. I personally don't see anything until I get to that milligram per day. I'll take that in the morning on an empty stomach with all this other stuff, but it's quite a while before my first meal. And it has made a noticeable big time difference to how my gut responds to bigger amounts of food. And for the PEDs, so this is the starting point. 220. I was 224 before walking out on stage prejudging. I didn't weigh myself before finals. I probably should have. But I'm starting with 1050 test, and that's just because I have 300 milligram per ml concentration, and a half an ml is 150 milligrams per day. So that's why the funky numbers. EQ 500 megs, NPP 210 megs. VAR, this was a Compton idea. He talked about using 25 milligrams every other day. He said that he seems to notice people getting all the benefits that you would from orals, but without the like lower back pumps and loss of appetite that are commonplace with orals when you take them every day or at higher doses. So I'm interested to try that. I have a ton of Proviron left over from the prep, so I'm gonna use that. I mean, most people don't even count that in terms of like towards your total milligrams of steroids because of how little it does anabolically. I just have seen um, tremendous benefit in how it seems that there's like a synergy when you have Proviron in that it makes everything else work better. I also just like the idea, especially even with like a kind of quote unquote wetter compound like NPP. I like, for me, the idea of having some DHT in there as well. Um, just for more of that like non-aromatizing, harder look. And then so clenbuterol, I had worked up to 120 micrograms at peak um for the prep. I pulled that out about a week out actually to make sure that I wasn't like shaky during um like posing on stage and everything. And then so I think it's wise a lot of times to leave some in for a small time or a small amount, to prevent like a crazy rebound, especially if I mean, I'm doing this without cheat meals, but especially if someone's going to be a little loose with the diet, I think that can help. And it's not an amount that's like risky or really should even prevent sleep because it's such a reduction from what you used in the prep. So this is how I'm going to taper off of it. Do a couple of weeks at 40 micrograms, which is just one tablet, and then a week at half a tablet, and then be off of it. The 100 micrograms of T4, I use that in throughout the entire prep. Only at about 3 weeks out, Compton also put in T3 in a small amount, 25 micrograms, and that was in an effort to keep my metabolic rate moving, but with the big time reduction in actual cardio. We kind of just, for lack of a better phrase, we kind of just let the drugs do the work at that point. So that's why he had put T3 in, but no need for it here. I loved it. I can't say enough good things about T4. It's so much more of a smooth process than kind of the blunt force trauma of T3. And then again, using high growth hormone, which can limit the T4 to T3 conversion that the body goes through, supplementing with that here, I think will do wonders for me in terms of like body composition and metabolic rate, even as body weight and food increases. GH, I talked about this with Compton. I wanted to go straight to 20 IUs, and he was concerned like water wise that I would just blow right up. So for anyone that follows me, you guys know I do a lot of lab testing that I send samples off of all the different batches that I've tried over the years, different sources. So anything that I have, I've tested. And so I have, a couple of boxes of 16 IU bottles. So I'm going to run a bottle a day of that for a bit. And then eventually I have bottles that are 40 IUs. And eventually I'll work my way up to half a bottle of that. But we're going to give it a bit. IGF LR3, Compton and I have still gone back and forth about this. I don't think it makes sense to start it right away. If we're looking to get 10 weeks out of this rebound, it might make sense to start somewhere around the 5 week mark. It might also make sense to save it completely and then just use it as something I use during the cruise. Like your cruise is a time for you to anything that skews in terms of your health or blood work. Your cruise is the time to remove that stuff or lower it in an effort to improve those things. So something like IGF, and high GH are not, for me at least, are not going to negatively affect anything, not even my blood pressure. So, that might be an opportunity to bring gear way down. And especially like I may often only cruise 6 weeks. I'm going to do 8 after this one. So, 2 or 3 weeks into my cruise, when the gear has really started to come back down more towards normal, I think that might be where I put the IGF in and keep the GH high. And then it's almost a way to continue making progress while also getting more healthy. Arimidex to help manage the possible aromatization from a gram a test. A lot of people EQ can manage it, or help modulate E2. But for me, at least, I still, I've had gyno surgery. I'm predisposed, I would say, to just aromatizing at a heavier rate. And being that this test is still 2 to 1 for the EQ, for me, this hasn't been a ratio that tanks my E2 on its own. So I am going to manage it with some Arimidex. I use telmisartan always. I use that all the time, 80 milligrams before bed. That's an ARB blood pressure medication. And then these last two are with the high GH in mind. I ran high GH all prep, um, with no issues. And that's because my body weight's coming down. I'm doing tons of cardio. My carbs are low. Inflammation is low. Body retention is low. Or, sorry, water retention is low. So all these things allow you to get away with higher growth hormone. I had tried higher growth hormone in the off season, and I only lasted about a month because, body weight's high, food is high. I would say in general, just inflammation is high. And I have talked about this on the podcast, but I was getting what I would describe as lava hands, where it's not just carpal tunnel, it's not just numbness of just my hands. I'm talking from my shoulder joint to my fingertips, once an hour on the hour, every night going to bed. It would feel like my arms were on fire. And so it's just disrupting my sleep. I'm only sleeping a couple hours a night. And then I would get up and walk around the house, and it would take 30 minutes for the feeling to subside. And then I'd go back to sleep for maybe an hour, and then the same thing would happen. So all of that, I've spoken to a handful of people, especially Muscle MD. Shout out to Muscle MD. He wrote me up an entire strategy to help achieve these higher doses while managing that specific side effect. And he talked about, I'm on the max dose of telmisartan, and then he talked about a low dose of an ACE inhibitor. So that's what this column is. I have gone with lisinopril. I'm going to use 10 milligrams of that with the ARB before bed. I'm going to take my GH as an entire bolus before bed. And then this last one, he talked about, this doctor that I spoke with talked about, in the most extreme cases, even when you use the dual therapy BP medications, he's had guys that ran 18 IUs of Serostim or whatever the case is, and then they were still getting like that hand numbness. He's talked about using a low dose of hydrochlorothiazide, something like 6 or 12.5 milligrams, to go along with these two. And he said he's never seen the trio not been able to manage even the most extreme cases or highest doses. So I have this on hand. I'm going to see how these two manage it first, especially at least during the rebound. You're still less water retentive, less heavy, and eating less than like peak off season when I had previously tried the GH at a higher dose. So I'm going to try these two to start in hopes that it helps manage this GH and the side effects. So, That's everything, guys. I'll keep you guys posted. The episode 2, where I kind of recap the entire first week of this rebound, will come out probably Sunday after I have like a full week and can summarize the whole week, both in terms of training and then the response and any updates. So that's everything. Thanks again to everybody that follows the channel, anybody that reached out about the show, watched the prep series, whatever. Like I said, new chapter, and I'm grateful to everybody that follows along.